welcome to another episode of Rediscovering Conservatism, a webcast series that is sponsored by New Direction and Fundación Civismo. And today we are delighted to be joined by Mr. Robert Zīle, who is a distinguished Latvian economist. He's also a member of the European Parliament for the Latvian National Alliance since 2004. Previously, Mr. Zīle had been a member of the Latvian National Parliament, the Saima, where he soon rose to the chairmanship of the Budget and Budget and Finance Committee, my apologies. Shortly after obtaining his doctorate in economics, he became Latvia's finance minister in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. He was also in charge of liaising with multilateral financial institutions. Later, Mr. Zīle was also a transport minister. And right now in Strasbourg and Brussels, Mr. Zīle is a member of the European Conservatives and Reformists Group Executive. He also sits on the Transport and the Tourism Committee, the Delegation for Relations with the People's Republic of China, and he's also a substitute in the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee. He sat for a brief period of time on the Special Committee on the Financial and Economic Crisis and set up in 2009. And if I may, Mr. Zīle is also perhaps the ECR's most gifted guitar player, certainly within the ECR. And Mr. Zīle, I want to start here with something that's really taking up a lot of your time over recent days and weeks. You've been hard at work in a number of negotiations, very thorny ones, in the European Parliament, concerning, first of all, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the RRF, where you're the rapporteur of the Tourism Committee's opinion. You've also worked on negotiations for the Connecting Europe facility and also the MFF, the Multiannual Financial Framework. And I wondered if we can maybe get started by getting some insight from you on what those negotiations have been like, what your role in them has been, and what the ECR's larger role has been in them, and what we can expect.
Yeah, thank you very much for your long introduction. So I perhaps became a bit red, so many nice things, and also from my memories. What I would like to start on concerning this RFF, Resilience and Recovery Facility, which is the biggest amount of so-called this borrowed money. Everybody knows in Europe, I think 750 billion euros will be borrowed with with guarantees from the governments and national parliaments. From the financial market, it will be done by the European Commission, and then they will distribute according allocation keys this money, 390 billion as a grants, so meaning not repayable resources, and all the rest, 360 billion, would be available for member states for loans if they want to take loans through the Commission. So, but of course, it's the first time, as we know, in European Union. And that's why it's very politically sensitive, and Resilience and Recovery Facility is the biggest part of this amount of money, as I told. And we had in Parliament through several committees to create opinions. And on this stage, we are on a final stage for the Parliament's position through the Budget and Econ committees as the responsible committees to prepare the vote. And then the scenario is that before the plenary, negotiators will negotiate with Council, with German presidency, because Council position on this fund of this facility already is very well known several weeks ago. So, and then would be maybe 3-4 weeks direct dialogue with the involvement of the Commission, and then would be final decision, as I hope, to allow for the Commission to go ahead with those loans from the financial market and distribution of money, which in many countries like Spain, Italy particularly, but all the rest of Europe as well, they are waiting to get these resources to finally help the economy, to health systems in their countries, to make reforms in particular sectors and so on. This is a general aim, but my impression from this work in the last, I would say, more than 1 month or maybe 1.5 months on those dossiers. It took, I don't know how many hours, maybe 100 hours for me and for my people from my team, even more. Thank you for them. But in general, I can say that the Parliament's position all over is going to too much to compromises among different political groups here in the Parliament, different political families. And our one of the closest partners, European People's Party, partner for ECR, they unfortunately went too far, to my opinion, to compromises with Greens, with Renew Europe, with Social Democrats, and sometimes even with GUE, with a very far left parties here in the European Parliament. So that's why I don't think that currently Parliament position seems to me on this RFF facility, this recovery facility. I think it's much more. I would prefer the government's position on these files and the Parliament's. That's the current status. We will see how it will develop.
Sure.
I can explain also why it's so, because it's, if it's I think it's important for people. Unfortunately, the Parliament's position is coming that Brussels would like to teach national governments how to use this money too much, to my opinion. Of course, we know those European semester issues, those who are in financial matters familiar with this, it was created legislation. Then, of course, there is a country-specific recommendations coming every year from the European Commission to particular member states. Let's do some bottleneck issues, some difficulties, according to the European Commission opinions, what member states should do it. And I think it's reasonable compromise. Was initially, of course, the member states have to take in account this country-specific recommendations. At the same time, it's national governments. They have to understand where they have to spend money. But Parliament even went too far. I think they started to earmarking money for 6-pillar system, for example. First pillar is all the Green Deals. The second pillar is digital issues. Where there's a earmarking of particular amount of money which you have to spend. And they created also social pillar, and they created youth and all the nice things, which any member states knows how to better to use. And for example, youth unemployment perhaps is more difficult issue in Mediterranean countries and less on north of Europe. So that's why you cannot create a one-size-fits-all approach and to push from Brussels as a clear guidelines how to do it. So there should be some guidelines, but it's going too far on a Parliament's position now currently. That's why I think European conservative reformists would be very skeptical on this issue. But of course, we don't want to delay this final trialogue with the council and to move ahead, and this money should be distributed. Currently, it seems that the most optimistic time is March or maybe April next year only. And if it's later, it's even worse. Right.
Well, Mr. Zīle, this is tremendously useful, and as you and I were discussing before jumping online, is these are generally the way that the EU is sort of coordinating the response on the economic front here to this COVID shock has been very opaque. And as important as the issue is in itself, and a lot of people feel just how important it is to have an appropriate economic response to the economic shock, I would say that generally folks across the continent aren't really closely following what these negotiations are looking like. So it's really a privilege to get to hear from you just how the sausage is made, so to speak, and generally also, but also very importantly to understand what the ECR's role is being in these negotiations, and as you said, to try to tame the zeal of the Commission to kind of guide how national governments are going to be appropriating all of these sums of money. And I want to delve deeper here into one aspect of your expertise, which is the monetary kind of set of issues. Obviously, since working in Latvian politics, this has really been an issue of overriding concern for you. You were Latvia's Minister of Finance, like I said, in the late 90s and early 2000s. And I wonder if we can discuss here specifically how you assess the European Central Bank's response to the COVID shock, and generally maybe touching also on how you think the governance structure of the euro could be improved. Latvia joined the common currency at a time when to a lot of countries, such as mine in the southern Eurozone, it didn't seem that it made a lot of sense. It was a very difficult time for the euro. So 6 years on, after Latvia joined, how do you think the euro is doing?
Well, I will try to do my best to make this long answer as reasonably short as possible, but not to lose the substance. First of all, from times when I was Minister of Finance in Latvia, that was totally different issues challenging the Latvian government at that time. It was late 90s. Inflation was pretty high, so we had a national currency, but we are a small economy, a bit more than 2 million people, and with a reasonably low GDP per capita, at that time even lower, of course. So, and our aim was, of course, to go to the Western direction, meaning to join the European Union and NATO, for most of the parties creating coalitions, so including my own party. So, and that time we had a pretty big budget deficit. So I can be proud that I created the first from two balanced budgets in Latvia. So one is mine, the first one. So I actually introduced a very interesting tradition, made like a copy a bit from the Gladstone box from UK, where the Minister of Finance is bringing to the Parliament the next year budget, and it's always a very good tradition. I gave to my successors this portfolio. I started this tradition, and it works more than 20 years now. So actually, I would say so. It's also a few weeks ago in Latvia, current Minister of Finance brought this portfolio to the Parliament. It became like a symbol in Latvia, like symbol of the budget.
It's a great legacy.
But we succeeded that time in the late 90s. And on 98, we had a Russian financial crisis, if some people remember. So, and that was banking sector was in difficulties in Latvia because many banks, commercial banks, bought Russian treasury bills and other bonds. And of course, there would be no value from those bonds, and that was difficult times. We used to have some banks. So in a sense, we had a next crisis which came before our accession to Eurozone. It was late 2008, 2009. My party was still in government. I was in parliament, but I was a leader of the party. So that's why I was very much involved in these government issues as well. And that was a totally different story. We had a skyrocketing of inflation. At the same time, there was a very easy credit money from the different games in real estate business, and we was overheated. And so then we had only two options. Either we will devaluate the national currency, but then we have to understand that Euro's accession to Euro is far away from us, or we will do internal devaluation, which is very painful, reduction of salaries, pensions, and other things. Governments at times choose this approach. And governor of the central bank that time also supported this direction. And then it would be just stupid if we had so much pain several years after 2009 ahead, so not to join your Eurozone, where doors were open. And for small economies, we need Eurozone because it's more create monetary stability for the country. And as I described situation with the Russian financial crisis, we could expect if we would keep a national currency for a long run, the Russians can, of course, destabilize our macroeconomic situation through the different measures. So that's why for Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, our neighbors, it was the right decision. We joined Eurozone with not in 1 year, all three countries, but we did it in several years' time. And I think in Latvia, there was debate actually about accession to Eurozone, but it disappeared after 1 week we joined. There was no debate on this. And I think there was no serious politicians or some, opinion makers, serious ones, who would say that it was wrong step for countries like Latvia. It doesn't mean that everybody could be happy in Eurozone or with the joining of Euro. We fully respect the size of the countries, differences. But for small economies, open economies like Baltic states, it was the right decision.
Sure, that's a really.
I didn't answer you about ECB. Sorry, current ECB.
Go ahead.
Just very shortly, I think, like we are not, but savers country, like frugal countries, like Netherlands, Sweden is not a Eurozone, but also among those frugal, like Austria. I think they of course have differently this issue, sending to Spain, Greece, Portugal, Italy. So, but I think Lagarde's ECB, they did a lot of right steps, what should be done to send signals to the market with a right, aggressive policy, which allowed to create stability in financial markets and not to overburden treasuries in many EU member states, Eurozone member states with borrowing. If you have a spread between Italian paper and German paper so high, it was used to be 3% points on. It was just too much. It doesn't work in one monetary union.
Well, that's going to be incredibly useful for folks to really understand where Latvia came from in those years, in the years leading up to its accession to the Eurozone, and having been a part of that process, it's really great to hear your perspective on it. And I want to shift gears here, Mr. Zīle, to something that has also been on your radar, and that has been an issue of major concern across the Baltic states. I can imagine in Latvia too. But the issue of energy independence for the continent and the issue of relations with Russia, primarily. I can imagine that it must have felt, and the ECR Group has been rather vocal in voicing these concerns. It must have felt really disheartening when, in the wake of the Kremlin's attempted poisoning of Alexei Navalny, the opposition leader, there didn't really seem to be an intention by the Germans to make Russia pay for what was clearly an illegal act. And I wonder, how do you comment this issue? What's your job been like in the European Parliament, advocating, arguing for energy independence for the continent as a whole, and largely in the sort of more geostrategic realm for containing Russian aggression generally, since the Baltic states are right there in the neighborhood of Russia?
Well, the first in overall, of course, we always know what would be the Russian, the Kremlin policy on the so-called nearest abroad, as they are calling, meaning those former Soviet bloc countries, including, of course, all three Baltic states, including my Latvia. We don't have any kind of rose glasses on our eyes, so we understand that it's always some dangers coming from our eastern neighbors. So it definitely will continue, and we know what's happened in Ukraine some years ago, and continue now, and also some influence in Moldova, Georgia, and some other so-called former Soviet bloc countries. So that's why it's general. With the energy sector, which of course was arm of Kremlin to use against countries, and for years, after we regained independence in early 90s, all three Baltic states were depending 100% from the gas sector from Russia, and also electricity market, we were connected with a Russian system, not with the North Pole like it is now. So that's why for me also in the European Parliament was very important when was 2009. I think we worked on electricity and gas liberalization legislation, which was very important. How to divide gas sector enterprises, separate from transmission from those who are selling the gas, and also those who are transmitting and storing the gas in storages, where we have in Latvia actually very big gas storage, which is important geopolitical, I would say, asset. Let's put it like that. But of course, sometimes it's dangerous asset as well. So, and since I think 5 years ago, Lithuanians, our neighbors, they created the floating LNG terminal, which allow technically to move some gas, not only from Russia, but also from ships, whatever they are coming from. So that's created some kind of opportunities. And European Commission, we also lobbied very significantly, created this, there was a special fund when we had the financial crisis, and there was established some kind of money for the connection, subsidies for the connecting gas pipelines. We created gas pipeline between Finland and Estonia, which is north from Latvia, which also allowed to trade the gas, which was that time only Russian, but at least we created infrastructure for gas market, which was very important. Finally, we separated, according to the EU legislation, all those enterprises. It was not easy because Gazprom was owner of shares pretty significantly, together with the German Ruhr Gas at that time, which means, German and Russian links on gas market was with a long roots, I would say so. And of course, we are always fighting against Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 gas pipelines through the Baltic Sea, which is currently, Trump's government, they made significant steps. And this Nord Stream 2, which is a second pipeline on this gas through the Baltic Sea, it stopped. And it was neither satisfaction, not only from Russians, they are pretty angry in this issue, but also several Western European member states, businesses, and I would say also political elite. Perhaps they are hiding it, that they are not very happy with the situation, like Germany, maybe some other countries which were related to this project. But this describes how we feel. So for energy sector is very important. And finally, we have a target in 2024 to completely on electricity market, to completely to stop the electricity market with Russia, Belarus, and other former Soviet bloc countries. Currently, we do both Nord Pool network and Brel network, which is the so-called the Soviet system.
Sure, and this is going to be incredibly useful as well for our audience. And I want to turn to another issue here that is also at least indirectly related to the Baltic states' relationship to Russia, which is the issue of transportation. That's another issue where you've retained a very strong interest. You were transport minister, and now you sit on the tourism and transportation committee, where you've been the rapporteur of a set of key opinions. And I wanted to ask you about the Rail Baltica project, what your work on it has been recently. What are the prospects for a country like Latvia from greater interconnectedness with Poland and countries to your west? My understanding is that historically, for historical reasons, and some of which you were just alluding a minute ago, Riga used to be better connected to Moscow than it was to Warsaw or other capitals to the west, and that's certainly a vacuum or deficiency that we need to correct. And I wonder if you could maybe describe how Rail Baltica is going to help do that.
Well, actually, the railway market, it's a history of Europe. If you will look how different gauges of the railway sector are different. In Spain, they are different historically than in France and Italy and Germany and other countries. And in Latvia, because of the changes historically of the powers coming to us and occupying us, we had a very interesting story. For example, we had a European-sized gauges, so 1435 millimeters gauge, in 1930s. And it was possible from Riga, some capital of Latvia, to go to Berlin in 16 hours, which is not possible to do nowadays. Absolutely, there is no trains, but even that if we technically allowed to go trains to change the rail, actually I did it in my students' time to East Berlin from Riga. It took, then we changed the trains, it took about 30 hours or something. Today it's even worse, and there are no passenger trains at all and no freight trains at all. That's why so much traffic with lorries on the roads in this direction. So in Rail Baltica was an idea which was already created high-speed train line with 250 kilometers per hour, which is reasonable speed from Tallinn or even Helsinki, with a corridor from Finland to go through Riga down to south to Lithuania, Polish border, and then use a Polish updated route to direction Berlin through the Warsaw. So I think it's a project for century, as we are calling sometimes. And I was fighting since I was Minister of Transport. We started. There was in Brussels that time. We were not yet members of European Union, but there was high-level working group working on so-called flagship projects for the transport sector in European Union. It was only the Baltic state project that time, and it was developed. There was very difficult years when we almost thought that it's over because it requires a lot of money. But then was Siim Kallas, good also, I would say, colleague of mine. He was transport commissioner, Estonian, and former minister, and also prime minister and governor of the central bank. And in 2000, between 2009 and 2014, he gave a good opportunity. He created actually also later on this approach of Connecting Europe facility as a special fund from which we can finance those flagship, very costly projects. And this helps still, okay. But life is not easy. We are coming to the next MFF, Multiannual Financial Framework, while Connecting Europe facility had the challenges to finalize this Rail Baltica project. I'm keeping all the time my eyes on this project, and I will do whatever it takes to ask me to. We had also in European Parliament, I am chair of this group of Rail Baltica friends. So we have MEPs from different member states, not only from Baltic states. There are Germans, there are Dutch, there are Romanians even coming. So, and it was always worked very well. We are inviting either transport commissioner time to time. We are meeting about, normal, not in COVID times, but normally we are at the meetings every 4, 5, 6 months, seeing development, inviting implementing agencies from involved member states like Baltic states, Poland, Finland, So, and it was good opportunity to keep the political pressure to develop this project. But it's really important understanding that Baltic states still are islands in some sense, not geographically because it's a land, but there is no train connections at all with the rest of Europe. So that should be done also from the geopolitical point of view, not only from the purely commercial point of view, from freight or passenger business.
Well, that's incredibly useful, and the anecdote you recounted there at the start about the fact that connections from Riga and from the Baltic states generally to the west of Europe have gotten worse with Soviet in the post-war years, and that really goes to show that that at least the EU could be playing a major role in helping spur a more interconnected continent, and certainly the countries that were deprived of those links and those connections with other countries to the west now have an opportunity, and we surely wish you the best of luck with the Rail Baltica project. I want to shift gears now, Mr. Zīle, to something else that I understand has also been on your radar recently. I believe either you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but either last Friday or the Friday before that. So in the last couple of weeks, the plenary sessions, the plenary debates ended on proposed reforms to the agricultural policy, right? The common agricultural policy. And if you've been involved in those, I wonder kind of what can you tell us? What can European farmers, Latvian farmers expect from this round of reforms to such an important pillar of EU policy?
Well, actually, for Latvia, we are, as I told, by population, we are a pretty small country, about 2 million population inhabitants, but at the same time, we are pretty large by territory. And actually, we had a lot of forest and also related with our businesses, and agriculture became really the branch of economy which gives a lot of on our export side revenues, also in sectors which we didn't have in the Soviet times as a clear priority, like, for example, grain. It's a real world market product, which our farmers are selling on the market. They created good cooperatives. And the same dairy products, they are also very competitive globally and also on EU market. So, and agriculture is really become a serious business. And that, of course, is a contradiction when you have a serious business in areas, in rural areas and in agriculture. You have a contradiction between green development and environmentally friendly development and more traditionally or conventionally, I would say, farming. And this is, of course, related concretely also with the next CAP, Common Agriculture Policy reforms, which is related with next MFF. I also were fighting together with my Baltic colleagues for years. There are so-called, everybody knows in Common Agriculture is so-called first pillar, which means direct payments for the hectares, for example, for any farmers. And they differ a lot. And we are in Baltic states and Latvia had the lowest level, even with some additional gain in July European Council meeting. Our Prime Minister fought it pretty hard. But anyway, we expect that in 2027, our direct payments from this first pillar payments to Latvian farmers will be only 82% of average in European Union farmers. Mm-hmm. But then you have Dutch farmers who had skyrocketing payments, or Danish farmers actually who are buying some land in Latvia. Wow. And to do some farming. So you see this is an unfair competition between the local farmers and also other farmers. And other actually very important issue for us was how much European Union, through the Common Agriculture Policy, would like to dictate for member states how much we have to become green, if I may say, very simple. Mm-hmm. So an ECR majority of the position was reasonably, because if you will quickly ask to farming become well green, it means there will be decrease of the production. It means our grain farmers will not be able to compete in the world market, not to sell the grain wherever they want. The same with some dairy products and so on. So there should be reasonable balance and additional resources, because green farming, of course, is related on more costs for the production on the market. So how much you can balance? So, and that's why we wanted to keep as much as flexible in a Brussels European Parliament position, so member states can decide themselves how much to keep this balance reasonably. Of course, you need a green direction in farming as well, but to understand how quickly we are going there. So otherwise, we are making some pain for farmers on the market, which is not in interest of the member state anyway, not only from the government, but also for people who are living from this income. So should we keep flexible balance, allowing member states not to follow one size fits all? Again, like we started our interview, that I can say this is again the example where some political forces wants to, in common agriculture, to use the same approach, one size fits all, which doesn't work in a so diverse European Union.
Well, I think that's tremendously useful, Mr. Zīle. I think you're giving us a very broad overview of what the ECR Group's role is being in these very important debates. One side of which is obviously, as you started our conversation with, is bringing some common sense to the conversation, where the EU seems all too willing to impose a one size fits all and a very uniform way of distributing whether it is funds or designing policies across countries that are very different in the way their economies are structured, and a number of other factors. And I really appreciate how you've connected that to the issue of the common agricultural policy, but also the issue of the environment. And I know the ECR is playing a very important role there in the conversation around the European Green Deal and a number of other issues. And we're trying to convey to our audience here what the positive role that the ECR as a group can play in all these very important debates. Now, there's another issue that I wanted to ask you about. I mentioned at the start, you also sit on the delegation of the European Parliament for relations with China, where with the People's Republic of China, as the official delegation is called. And I wonder, maybe this is a bit of a sensitive topic to talk about these days. I can certainly see how certainly maybe the group's work has been halted over the past few months. But can you tell us generally what you're hearing in Brussels and Strasbourg about what the EU's response to China should be in this very critical time, where we need to hold China accountable for the way they dealt with the origin of the virus and a number of other issues that are also of concern? What are you hearing? What is the role of the ECR Group in these conversations? And what do you think our policy towards China should look like in the future?
Well, actually, if you may understand, so communism is not very popular ideology for me, for all my history. So, and I always, I really don't like, some huge countries like China are managed by the Communist Party alone. So, and it's not really democracy. So my attitude is very precautionary, I would say, I'm not trusting the communists. I remember I was for years also for this China delegation, and I remember we went to Beijing. It was maybe 7-8 years ago. So, and there was one of the events was some special house. I don't remember. We're meeting with so-called other parties of China. Maybe some people don't know that there should be some other parties as well, but they are very small. And the main aim written in so-called constitution said they have to help the Communist Party rule the country. And so you can imagine what kind of negotiations is that for a European Parliament delegation. And then we had a nice meeting with European Union Chamber of Trade and Commerce, which was, there are many German, Dutch, experts who are working for years with the China business to try to influence European business to China. And they said so sad stories and so bluntly, well, you cannot succeed if you have a dispute with Chinese authorities and there are no really court, the legislation is almost doesn't work. Everybody from businesses from Europe wants to sell, of course, a huge market of China, but then you have to create a joint ventures and you have to give all your know-how to the Chinese counterparts. Later on, you are out of the business and things like that. So I am very pessimistic with the development of China, and we see that the Chinese Communist Party becoming even strong. They allow to distribute income as they want inside of the society. And there, everybody understands in business sides that they have to take in account the Chinese Communist Party way. So that's why I am pretty skeptical. So I actually like much more. I was sometime in Japan delegation where we succeeded actually with a trade investment agreement. The European Union with that time is Japan, and it was absolutely different mentality according to how we can do business. On COVID, I am not the expert of those who would like to understand where the COVID virus came out. Either, well, you know, all the rumors in the media and the social networks, of course. But of course, how China did, it was very, from our point of view, Europeans, I mean, mainly it was in Wuhan, they did it very in a strong way. But if you look what's going on with the COVID restrictions, so if I may to extend, so the good examples we can see now in Asian Pacific area. I mean, in South Korea, very small countries like by territory, like Hong Kong, on Singapore, or New Zealand, of course, example, and even countries like Vietnam, who sacrifice their tourism for this time, but they are trying to squeeze its COVID and to fight against the COVID. As our epidemiologists and experts in Latvia said, that look, European Union is going in a different manner. That's why they cannot win before vaccine. They cannot win COVID. They just can make it a bit less, because the European Union would like to keep the borders open as a key priority. Of course, well, it's very discussable. So, but I think you can really perhaps hit and damage your economy with not winning COVID completely, or at least reasonably low level, very low level. Then you can help do it maybe in a short term, and then you can make it more open and economy trust and come again to the growth. European Union, unfortunately, with some kind of this approach, not allowing for member states to fight coronavirus more strictly in a more short term. So that is not only my view. I was listening and reading my experts, medical experts. So, but I fully understand that the European Union is not following this direction, which we can monitor in Pacific area and also in Asia.
Well, that's a really it's a gloomy note on which to end our conversation, but we've covered so much ground, and we're so grateful that you shared your time and your thoughts with us. It's so important for our audience here of the Rediscovering Conservatism series to get access to how you're dealing with these very, very complex issues. And we started with the economic portfolio, where you've been such an asset to the ECR Group with obviously experience in national government and at the EU at the highest levels of these discussions. And we're really grateful that you shared your time and your thoughts with us. And I want to thank also our audience for watching this conversation. Make sure to come back to the series and watch the following episodes as we keep discussing with some of the freshest thinking on the ride. And we were so happy and delighted to have Mr. Zīle with us today. And thank you so much once more.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.